were three main styles of country music that emerged in the early 20th century that our textbook really details in chapter 4. And we're talking about bluegrass music, honky tonk music, and Western swing music. Bill Monroe was the father, and is considered today to be the father of bluegrass music. While there were several brother groups that made contributions in a major way to the early recorded country music, Bill Monroe's group with his brothers, the Monroe Brothers, was by far the most influential. And of course, after leaving that group, after the Monroe Brothers broke up, Bill Monroe kind of regrouped and started doing something a little different. He was looking to reinvent his sound. He did. He became what many would call the progenitor of bluegrass music, or the father of bluegrass music. He looked around for a unique sound. He had a lot of ideas that he wanted to combine. He wanted to use blues traditions. He was a fan of blues music, and had some really informative experiences working with a man named Arnold Schultz, who was an African American, and probably would have passed on some of these blues traditions to Bill Monroe. Of course, he was exposed, as anyone would have been in the early 20th century, to jazz music, and we certainly saw jazz principles that showed up in Bill Monroe's music. He was a strong fan of gospel music, and he brought a lot of those gospel quartet sounds into his early bluegrass music as well. And of course, the early country music, which had been labeled hillbilly music. Bill Monroe didn't necessarily like that term. He didn't call his music hillbilly music, but country music of the time also factored in greatly in the early bluegrass music creation. The final link to Bill Monroe's band, even though he formed his band in 1939, the Bluegrass Boys, that is, changed the name to the Bluegrass Boys in 39. The final link, as most people consider it to be at least, in bluegrass was when Earl Scruggs joined the band. Earl Scruggs being the famous banjo player later with the group known as Flatt and Scruggs. This brought a dynamic new sound to the Monroe tradition. Essentially, with Earl Scruggs, people could listen to a banjo that was highly virtuosic, very precise. Earl Scruggs could play from one fret to the other at rapid speeds that just amazed the audiences. His creativity was second to none, and his precision was incredible. His banjo playing just brought a whole new dimension to Bill Monroe's sound and to the band in 1946. Of course, shortly after that, Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt, a singer with Bill Monroe's band and guitar player, decided they were going to leave the band, and soon after they decided to form their own group called Flatt and Scruggs, which became very successful in their own right, one of the greatest bluegrass bands as well. Honky-tonk music, of course, also showed up in the early part of the 20th century. Our textbook references the early Merle Travis recording, Divorce Me, C.O.D. Of course, we think about honky-tonk music, we probably think about Hank Williams and Ernest Tubb, and certainly Jimmy Rogers, who all sang a style of country music that was very edgy, and a style of country music that was often kind of geared towards, as our textbook would have quoted it, the noisy beer halls. It was rowdy music at times. The plot often centered on quote, drinking, extramarital love, and divorce. Certainly, these themes existed already in both African American and Anglo American secular music, but honky-tonk music was different. Instead of just existing in that music, in honky-tonk music, it almost celebrated the dissolution of the family and the strains that were being placed on traditional American values. Hank Williams and the Drifting Cowboys often featured this type of sound, and of course they topped the charts really quite often between 1949 and 1952. Mr. Williams dying on the last day of 52 or the first of 53. Again, that's kind of speculation. They know that he passed sometime between late New Year's Eve on 1952 and New Year's on 53. But as the textbook would have quoted it, his fidelity to a honky-tonk lifestyle is reflected in his own turbulent marriages, chronic bouts with alcoholism, frequent emotional upheavals, and his tempestuous relationships with the management of the Grand Ole Opry and an important Shreveport radio program, the Louisiana Hayride. In other words, Hank Williams was known for living through the songs that he wrote, and so he had a turbulent life, and these things showed up in his compositions, and the audiences really related to the genuine authenticity of the delivery. In part, I think a lot of people would say because they were really, in great part, telling about his life. Western swing was also an important force to be reckoned with in country music in the early 20th century, essentially combining jazz style music, blues music, and country music. Western swing can be ranked as one of the most interesting and diverse American musical hybrids. Of course, with Western swing music, you certainly had the influences of country music and swing jazz coming together, but you also would discover the influences of blues music and Western swing, and also Tex-Mex Norteño music, the music of the north of Mexico and the southern part of the Texas border. Keep in mind that Western swing was a style that was formed in Texas. And of course, you found these things coming together with fiddle tunes to form a unique musical hybrid that was very, very popular in the early 20th century. Bob Wills, as the textbook pointed out, remains the undisputed king of Western swing, and he was also one of the key architects that helped to form this style of music.